Hi, I'm Jason Miller, Executive Editor of Federal News Network, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our Ask the CIO Bureau of Fiscal Service webinar, sponsored by Workday. Before we begin, we'd like you to answer a few polling questions. Please indicate your choices of the following questions, and we'll get started shortly. Today's discussion will be presented in 5 sections since we're recording it for radio broadcast on Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. Enjoy the discussion. My guest today is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal, Accounting, and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Glad to be here.
First of all, I have to just make it obvious to everyone, you're in person, I'm in person. This is, we shouldn't be surprised by this, but is a nice, refreshing discussion we're going to have today. And we're going to focus today on the Administrative Resource Center and specifically around shared services. And there was just a big shared services conference in end of April, early May that I got to meet a bunch of your folks at and learn what's going on. But I'm going to ask you to start at the beginning. What's the current state of the Administrative Resource Center in terms of shared services, number of customers? Just give me the latest.
Yeah, so ARC is very fortunate to be a trusted shared service provider for about 87 federal agencies. And they are from small commissions and independent agencies, several Treasury bureaus, some medium-sized agencies, and then a few CFO agencies like HUD, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and at the end of this year, beginning of next fiscal year, Office of Personnel Management will be the next large customer that comes on to the ARC platform.
And when we talk about the number of services you provide, it's not just like you're known for instance, financial management. I just talked to your colleague Tammy Perillo quite a bit about shared services and the QSMO. We'll get into that in a little bit. But you also provide a host of other shared services too.
Correct. So our portfolio is, as you said, financial management. We have about 50 agencies that we support there. And then we also provide for about 29 agencies in addition procurement services, human resource services, and travel services. So we have, we call it our 4 business service lines.
One of the things about when we talk shared services is there's just been challenge to get folks to use them, and it seems like you all have been doing a pretty good job at that, and we'll go into that about the why. But my little news antenna came up. So OPM's coming to ARC, as you said, next fiscal year for financial services, or
correct, financial management services. Yeah, for financial management services, definitely.
And I know the HUD. I've been following the HUD challenges they've had on their own and moving to ARC finally. That's a fairly big win then for you all to get another nice size agency like OPM.
Well, I think it's good. I think, as what shared services is about is being able to provide that benefit to agencies and across the federal government. So we spread that knowledge across, and so OPM is going to get the benefit of us implementing HUD and other things like that. And so we've been able to use that as a process to bring them on board.
All right. And I imagine, without going into too many details, you have a lot of conversations that are ongoing with some other potential CFO type of customers. I know for years, just going to name them that I know, SBA, Labor are 2 ones that have tried to move to other shared service providers, private sector or public sector, and have had challenges. I imagine these conversations are ongoing among the group of big agencies.
Yes, I would say that's the case. I mean, we are a proponent of shared services in general at the Bureau of Fiscal Service and the Administrative Resource Center. We want to be available for all agencies, no matter what size they are.
And generally speaking, what are some of the trends you're seeing? Because obviously financial management is the one of all the marketplaces when we're talking about it, that's a little bit ahead. But procurement, travel, HR are all very popular, in areas of focus. Are you getting more finance, more HR, more procurement, or just it's all over the gamut?
Generally, it's more on the financial management side. Generally, that's kind of our way in, and then we do provide those other services if they're coming in for financial management services.
Roughly, again, how many agencies are triple dipping or quadruple dipping, right? Getting finance and all 29?
That I don't have the
Okay.
answer for right now. I'd be happy to get back to you on that, but I think it's a pretty good number of our agencies of that 29 that are doing it, that are also doing financial management.
And that's the key here, because you have, if you're getting your finance, procurement makes sense, right? If your travel makes sense, it's all spending money. So that's why I figured it was just maybe it was a logical move.
Well, one of the things that when you do have those services that I've been impressed as I've been working with the folks in ARC is that, so we're building not only the accounting system that we use for that, but we also built interfaces with those, let's say Prism or one of those other systems, right? And so that knowledge then, when somebody comes on board and uses those other systems, we're able to help agencies do that, and they don't have to recreate the wheel.
And that's the whole point of shared services. Like, don't recreate the wheel. We're going to use that knowledge, as you said, from HUD or from NRC or whomever, some of the smaller agencies or treasury bureaus, to apply to the next customer. And let's go down that path a little bit. We know the Biden administration is working to improve the federal back office business processes, encourage use of shared services. What's ARC's role in supporting that goal beyond the fact of offering the services themselves?
Well, of course, we support the administration's priorities there, and we've been committed to providing mission support and back office business processes for more than 20 years. To me, this is considered mission critical work for the Administrative Resource Center. We have the expertise, we have the skills that do the back office, which then allow the agencies to focus on their mission critical programs and systems they have, knowing they have that experienced, skilled shared service support behind them. Doesn't mean they don't have to look at that and be involved in it, but it does mean they have a good back-end processor who's supporting them.
That's the one thing that I think has come up when I've covered shared services for the last 20 plus years. What's the value in it for that agency customer? And I think one of the things that this administration is trying to do is really take that human-centered, we hear that a lot in software development, but the human-centered approach to customer experience, we hear that a lot through, for instance, the executive order. How has ARC kind of taken those concepts and applied them to how you're delivering shared services? I mean, you could say we've always done it, but there's a renewed focus I would offer.
I would say, if you were to ask me what is our priorities right now, one of them is we are focused on increasing financial management maturity and the quality and the customer and the employee, because we have employees who work for us that have an experience of working in our systems, the efficiency and scalability of our programs, with the goal of being able to provide timely data and information to the agencies so they can do their work and make their decisions. So yes, it's really now becoming more about standardization, but we also want to know what our customer experience is through the whole process. We generally get a 90% customer satisfaction in our services offerings each year, but customer service and actually customer experience is a little different. And so we want to make sure we're bringing the agencies in early whenever we're trying something new or bringing in a new system or something like that, so they're early on in the process.
Interesting you bring up the idea of customer service versus customer experience. I imagine customer service is, hey, I called you, I had a problem, you fixed it. Customer experience is, I logged on and how was my experience using your system or getting the data I need back? Is that how you all are looking at it?
Yes. As the Bureau, we are putting that focus on across all of our services. I've had the pleasure of working in the Bureau for almost 32 years now, and it's an organization that does centralized financial management and shared service financial management. And what we are putting a renewed effort on is that customer experience, bringing the agencies or understanding the agencies' customers, that might be the public, to be able to use our systems. Oftentimes we are very subject matter expert of what we do, and we think we know what the answer is, but as we develop and modernize our systems in a more agile, human-centered design approach, we are bringing the customer in early to gauge what you just said. What is it that you like about the system? What don't you like about the system? What could we change?
And a lot of times these changes are not system changes, but business process changes. Is that where a lot of that depth of conversation is happening, where, hey, the system is the system, and if we make unique needs all the time, if we're always kind of customizing, you're going to lose the benefits of shared services. So is that the part of the conversation? A big part of the conversation is the business process reengineering?
It definitely is. I tell you that we have 4 business lines, as we mentioned, And then we have a number of services that we provide under each one of those. And we have 13 of them. We commonly refer as our dirty dozen, but there's 13 of them that are the ones that provide, that represent about a third of our workforce. So it's a good amount of our people who are supporting the agencies, and it's about 20% of our service costs. So we're focusing our skilled employees who do business process reengineering and automation to focus on those areas. And just recently we did a review of the commercial accounts receivable organization. And what I like about what I heard through that process is this review was done, and it came up with about 10,000 labor hours of savings and possibly over $800,000 in cost avoidance, right? Because sometimes you still use those people to do something else, but they can get off the manual process. Also, what I like about this business processing reengineering groups that we're doing is they actually came back and told us where you can get your savings is using a bunch of different things. So it's not just one tool. So we are incorporating a robotic process automation bot into our reporting processes. That's going to save 5,000 hours. Separately, in this accounts receivable process, we're using a Salesforce workflow process to reduce the manual process of answering agency emails of over 100,000 a year, and that's going to save over 3,500 hours if we implement that. And then we've got an automation tool in our accounting software that is kind of like a bot that you incorporate it for reporting. That's going to save about 1,400 hours. And then something simple. We have a lot of people who come in and start working for us, and we need to train them. And sometimes that requires, a couple weeks of effort or whatever. But then there's some training that you just need once a year. We're building an automated video to replace some of that. We have over 200 SOPs and job aids. And so being able to have to understand all that, when you can put it in a video and just pull that up when you're doing that process, that's going to save 500 hours. So yes, it's a long-winded way to say we really are taking that to heart.
I think saving those hours is great, right? No one wants to do the manual work. We've talked about moving from out of low value into more high value. And that high value piece, which we'll talk about just in the next segment coming up, is really key to ARC delivering that value back to the mission area. So Jeff, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can jump into some of those technology sides, those technology angles. My guest today is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service at the Treasury Department. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. Jeff, before break, we're getting into the discussion around RPA and automation. I want to go down that path. But before I do there, let's talk a little bit about the really point of shared services for a lot of agencies is to get off legacy systems. I remember Treasury Bureau of Fiscal Service did a survey, I think in 2021, maybe it was the end of 2020, and they came up with about 56 different federal financial management systems that were reaching end of life, whether it was a year or 5 years, but it was a short amount of time, generally speaking. Help me understand how shared service is not just about providing services, but it's really the path towards modernization and how you all kind of find that right balance of providing services in a modernized way and, of course, keeping it modernized.
Yes. So, I'd like to say, as you mentioned, as part of the Treasury Financial Management vision, agency CFOs shared with us that they spent significant time implementing, operating, and maintaining core mission support systems and business processes. And that's, in a sense, distracts or maybe reduces the amount of time they can spend on core mission support systems and the things they actually are asked to do. And so I think that value can be unlocked through shared service providers like ARC. Again, our mission is to focus on those mission support services so the agencies don't have to. And so we leverage the shared systems and integrations that I mentioned before that we have to standardize the business process. Plus, we bring knowledgeable experts in those fields. And so, for example, in our Oracle example, our Oracle folks are very knowledgeable about how to use that system and helps the agency so they don't have to have that expertise. So that, again, allows the agencies to have to worry about that less and spend more time on what they need to do. Where this really comes to play is when ARC is able to operate and maintain our shared systems so agencies do not have to. It reduces the risk and the cost on the agency side. So a few years ago when we had to upgrade to our Oracle R12, we could do this for all of the agencies we had at a cost of about $200,000 to $300,000 per customer, where if you were just going to upgrade the system yourself, it could be up to about $12 million. So really, that is one of the real benefits, besides all of the other things we've been talking about, is that you can not have to be worrying about upgrading those systems.
One of the challenges I know is the funding issue, and that's out of your control for the most part. It's a Congress issue, it's an OMB issue, so without going down that path and asking you to comment too much on that, when you upgraded, did each of your customer agencies put in that money, or was it a way you guys have a working capital fund of sorts that you were able to kind of save a little bit and then pay for it that way based on the upgrades?
Yeah, so Jason, that is a little bit before I came here, but my understanding is, we have a modernization process that we have that we can do that fund with, but generally that cost is then applied across those agencies. So it's much easier if you're going to pay a portion of it at the end, the operation of those costs, versus having to put up the $12 million and then operate it going forward, right?
Right. And I think that's the one kind of big issue I've heard time and again is okay, yeah, that'd be great to modernize, but who's paying for it? And that's again, above our pay grades in that sense of it, but something that we see that gets dealt with. The other piece of this when we talk about modernization is, are you guys ready to handle that modernization? So there's internal systems within an ARC that has to be ready, your network has to be ready. So let's start with, we'll go backwards a little bit, let's start with automation. First of all, was that your first kind of effort in automation? Had you been working on RPA and other similar automation tools earlier? And is this showing that, okay, here's all the benefits of saving these hours, okay, now let's continue to evolve into AI, ML, and the like?
Yeah, no, it's not the first time. I would say robotic process automation, as I've learned, is one of the benefits of coming to a shared service provider, because you're able to really talk about financial transaction processing, which can be very regular. And so we've learned that by developing these robotic process automation bots, we can do a lot in the shared services realm. And we're considered a leader in the federal government by the federal RPA community, and we've implemented over 100 bots into production, and they've saved roughly 50,000 labor hours annually, or avoided cost towards those. So we're not new to the robotics, but it is definitely something we can continue to do more. And as I talked before, focusing on those key business processes, those dirty dozen, that really can get the benefit to us, because we have people who use the system and the agencies that interact with our system. So that's what we're spending our time on. I will say we still have some more work to do. We're starting in the AI development. So we've got some work to do there, but we're definitely looking at things like chatbot technology across the Bureau of Fiscal Service. We want to be involved in that, because that's going to provide easier access to user information. It's going to help us reduce our help desk support costs and contracts. And really, we want to get to delivering a customer-centric self-service system, right? There's emails that go back and forth, calls we get. How many of those could it be because the agency could just take care of, hey, my password is lost or whatever. Let's take care of that up front.
You mentioned AI, and I think that's key. You mentioned financial management. Let me ask you, because you also do procurement, you do HR, I don't want to lose sight of travel. Are you also applying these similar technologies to those areas? I think the answer is yes, but I'll ask you to maybe discuss what your vision is for those areas too.
Yes, and I think there's a couple things when you think about what does automation do. There's the cost avoidance, cost savings aspect of them, and then there's the control aspect of them, right? And so, one of those RPAs that we've developed is for the National Archives and Records Administration. They do a daily download and we're able to take that reconciling of the procurement data with their financial system data, and we only send them things that we consider to be outside a standard or something like that so they can review it. In the past, we probably sent them everything, and then you had to go through and look at all of that. Now we're doing that. Where the AI is going to come in is, okay, now that we're sending them that information, where there's false positives, can we stop sending those, right? So we can get the process to start thinking smarter so the agency doesn't have to even go through those. So that's one example of the control aspect. From the labor-saving aspect, the process to move money between federal agencies is an IPAC, and we've saved about 3,000 hours a year in an RPA that allows us to download the data and provide it to agencies and get it to us so that those reports are available. It runs at 1 a.m. at night, and now our folks are ready to answer questions the next morning, do the transactional process. They're not logging in the morning and running a bunch of reports.
And you're not paying anyone to work at 1 a.m. either. The bots work for free, so to speak.
They do, but it's
no coffee breaks. No. I guess we don't say cigarette breaks anymore, but no breaks.
Exactly, no breaks. But it's interesting. You treat it almost like a user, in terms of, hey, there's still a control there, and you want to make sure. And our auditors are definitely take a look at that to make sure those bots are doing what they have. And so you don't want to automate everything and take all of the control aspects out of things. So like I said, in the procurement and in the HR processing, there's still a need for human beings to be involved there, but what don't they have to do? That's where these bots and these AI can really help them.
It's also, as you train these bots and you train the automation, there's less need to worry about it. Once it's, okay, let's run that report, it works. Okay, let's run it again, it works. Okay, we've now run it for 10 weeks straight, and I've checked every week. So now I can have some confidence. So I think there's part of that too, but it's in the financial management world specifically, and probably in the HR world soon enough, that's just been ripe for using this automation. I think people see the value, and want that value because, if I don't have to run that report when I get in the morning and waste, the first hour of my day, it's there waiting for me. That's such a big benefit. And then they can get to what does it mean question much more sooner.
Exactly. And I think a lot of this is we've done internally to help, our processes, but our business process reengineering efforts are going and looking at where we're intersecting with the agencies too, to help look at where can we help them on their side a little bit and reduce some of the manual efforts on their side. Again, if we use a customer experience approach, we'll learn that, and maybe some of the things we're doing to automate on our side are causing them more work on their side, and that's not the point of a customer experience review,
That would be a bad customer experience review.
Exactly.
For sure. I want to, just as we get close to the end of the segment here, I would just want to talk a little bit about where you're going next with RPA. What have you done for me lately, Jeff? Right, that's the question. 100 bots, you saving all these hours, but where are you going next? What's your, if we talk again in 6 months or 12 months, what's the use of automation, bots, AI, and the like?
I think it's going to be first working through those business processes that I mentioned, the 13 of them, where we can continue to put those into. Again, we want to review the process, because you just don't want to go put a bot in again and it causes more issues down the road, either with our internal staff or with the agencies. So I would say we'll continue that. I think the other thing we've got to look at as you put more and more bots in, there's still a maintenance aspect of that, right? And so how much of it do we have to operate and maintain those bots versus continuing to be able to put new bots in? And so I think we'll continue to automate and do more with bots, but that's going to be an area where we're going to have to manage the operations versus the development aspect of it.
And just to remind folks that those 13 areas, you keep saying dirty dozen, I kind of want to say baker's dozen, but We'll call it what we want. That's all, you can find that on your website, so if folks are listening, they want to see where maybe some of the next opportunities are, they can find it there, I imagine.
I don't know if it's on our website, but what I can tell you is, one of the things that we do working with our customer agencies is they know which services they are. So I'll validate where they are on the services, but it's our 4 services, and we kind of define down which ones they are.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of folks who listen to the show we can help with a link at least to those 4 services on federalnewsnetwork.com and make it easy for them to start the research, and I'm sure they can find you if they need to contact you. Jeff, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue to talk about shared services. My guest is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. Jeff, we started going down the path of technology and the technology discussion a little more deeper in the last couple segments. We talked a lot about automation. We talked a lot about AI and the potential for artificial intelligence. Let's take maybe a half a step back and talk about, okay, to use those technologies, you got to have a network. You got to have the underlying foundation. So how are you looking at that modernization of your own network? How are you looking at cloud services and even moving toward a software as a service model?
Yeah, so leveraging cloud solutions is nothing new to ARC. For the vast majority of our solutions, we have used to deliver our services, they've been cloud-based. Some of them for almost up to 10 years. And those that we're currently adopting, things like our Salesforce and our ServiceNow, are cloud-based. So that is definitely the way we're going. As we think about going forward, as you mentioned, through our software as a service and our platform as a service offerings, we figure we will be able to define the value that's added to our customers through those which ones we're going to work best for them in a full suite of services so that they, again, can focus on their mission services. Moving forward, ARC will remain committed to use of cloud solutions, and we're planning to adopt the services and offerings that will be in the financial management, quality service management office marketplace. And so that's where we would see a number of additional services being provided by companies, and then we'll look to be a provider of services in that. And I think that's where agencies will be able to determine how we're using, software as a service going forward. And I think that's where the products that we're using are going to be continuing to evolve their cloud services.
And to be clear, just to put maybe a finer line on that, as the CUSMO marketplace builds up, as GSA and Bureau of Fiscal Service work together to create this new special item number under the schedules program, you may say, well, we're going to partner with company X to provide a service to the agency. And you may say, well, we already have some of that service. So we may move it to the cloud and provide it through a cloud base. So you'll kind of eat case by case basis on the service itself, as well as what's available, innovation, and the like. Am I framing that correctly?
You are framing it right. The way we've been looking at it is we need to be prepared to be a consumer of what's in the marketplace. As you mentioned, those not only the software providers, but we have integrators that help us with the agencies and integrating into our software. So those things we expect to be in there, and so we're going to be prepared to be able to handle that. And then we want to be a provider of solutions that we developed or have developed so that agencies can come in and say, well, I don't want to do it on my own and go and just have somebody provide the platform. I'd like to use ARC's technology group to be able to support me or be able to handle the full transactional processing that we do for agencies. So they'll be able to see that.
We know that the financial management CUSMO is really ahead of the other ones around government, but there's also, I know OPM is starting a process to look at the HR CUSMO and really get that up and running, develop a marketplace. Where are you with some of the other areas of shared services, whether it's travel or HR or procurement, that from a cloud perspective, and how are you looking at it the same way as you're looking at finance as a provider and a...
Yes, we will look at it that way. As more and more information come out from those CUSMOs, then we will be able to decide which way we're going to pass. I mean, it's very clear you still have systems for your HR process, you still have systems for procurement, and so we need to know what's going to be available in those marketplaces and how we're going to be supporting those.
In the short term, you'll be able to make some of those decisions on the financial side potentially by early 2023 calendar year. With HR, that could be much later in 2023, potentially into 2024. In the meantime, are you looking at, okay, how do we continue to modernize our HR systems, our procurement systems through whether it's cloud services or some sort of hybrid setup? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
We're actually just finishing up a tech and data roadmap that we've created. And what this really does is it looks at all 4 of our business lines, the systems that and software that we use in those 4 business lines, and where is the maturity level of those systems in that. The good news for us from what we're looking at is we don't have too many that are in that we have to really move off of and sunset. But there are a number, especially when they come out into the QSMO, that we're going to need to make decisions. Do we stay on the version we're on right now, or do we do the investment to go and get the additional cloud-based software services you can get on that? And so those are the things we're planning for. Again, we've got to maintain and operate the existing systems already. So what's the right amount of resources we're going to apply to the new stuff versus keeping things going for the agencies who are with us right now?
There's almost an innovation side that you have to, okay, is this innovation valuable to the customer? Are they going to ask for it? Are they asking for it? Or is it something that we're willing to invest in because we think they will ask for it eventually? So when around that technology and data roadmap, is it beginning stages? Are you in the middle of it? Is it almost done? How would you?
The roadmap is done. Now the next step. So we're basically sharing that up our organization. But that leads to the next step. Okay, so what are you going to do? And we now need to take some plans associated with that and say, okay, where are we going to put our resources in the next year? One of the things that I'm really wanting to focus on is looking out, 2, 3, 4 years, so we know where we're going to be on those. And this tech and data roadmap is going to help us do that.
All right, I'm going to ask the hard question. You can make that public for us to see? I told you it'd be a hard question.
It's a hard question, but it's a fair question, and I think it's something that at a high level, there's information on there that our agency customers do. The one thing I would like to say is our customer agencies have a lot of transparency into how we price our services, how we cost, and so especially when you go into the QSMO marketplace, that is going to be out there. So we have to figure out the best way so that agencies can go in and look at, okay, this is what they're offering in financial management, or this is in HR. Here's how much it's going to cost, and here's how much it's going to be. It's not as simple as people think, so we're trying to figure out how to simplify it. So you can say, if I go to ARC and I'm going to use accounts receivable, it's going to cost me this amount of money based on the transactions I have. Those are the type of things we want to be making available, like in the marketplace.
And I think it's also helpful for industry to understand your tech and data roadmap to a certain extent, because if they see, okay, they are looking to improve this area and I fit into that area, it's not so much guessing. I mean, it's in my opinion, of course, because I'm a journalist, is the more is better, because it's helpful to really direct where the next opportunities are. I don't know, because as we've talked about a little bit, you get a lot of probably questions from vendors. So I'm always would encourage the federal executives like yourself to more is better. But I understand there's a whole set of challenges.
Well, I think if you think about it, the QSMO is really a nice concept, because that group is really the ones that are working with the agencies. Right. It's not just going to be ARC that's in that marketplace. It's going to be the other shared service providers. So now the industry has a way to come talk to us, and we have a way to talk to them. The agencies come in. So that really does provide some of that transparency you're talking about.
And I think that was something that had been missing for years and years and years, too. So I agree that there's going to be a lot of interest in the QSMOs going forward. The other things that ARC is doing from a technology perspective, we talk cloud, we talk robotics. What else are you looking to get done? What else is on your agenda?
Yeah, I would say that one of the big things that we want to continue to focus on is how we interact with those different systems. So I mentioned, obviously if you come in for financial management, you're getting our system and how you're interacting with that with your core systems. And then you may come to us and are working with us in HR or in procurement. So right now, we're providing you information and data back from those services separately. So where we want to go is to be able to build the simplicity in our process to either, if agencies want to come in and get that data, and it's all make sure that it's secure and everything like that, they can come in and get the data. It could be across those 4 business lines if they use it, and be able to help that with their decision making. Or if that's not what they want to do, they have they want us to kind of be more involved in the data analytics, then we can provide that information and provide them dashboards and some information back that then they can do it. I imagine some of our smaller commissions and agencies are probably going to use the latter, whereas HUD and OPM, they're going to want to be able to get to the data there. So I think the data aspect is what we want to get timely data to the decision makers on the agency side.
It's almost that as a service model, because that's what shared services is. Hey, I'm signing up for a service that you're going to provide me. The data as a service is not a far reach. If I'm an agency, you're already using procurement, travel, FM, and HR, then just tell me what it says. I don't need you to send me the data. Just put it through an analytics platform. We're going to continue our data conversation in the next segment, but let's start in this segment. Just say, what are you doing today around data and how you're providing it, and then we'll talk in the next segment where you're going next.
Yeah. So again, we're using the existing software and information which we have currently in our systems to be able to do that with the agencies. I think where we're going to then take that to the next level is through our customer experience and our human-centered design. Is not just give it to you. Tell us what it is. How is it going to get to you? What's the best way for you to consume it? So we can build those workflows and that portal that we've started on so that you can easily consume it. Not, hey, send Jeff an email and then Jeff will send it back to you. Oh, I just got told he's on vacation, so now I got to go to the backup contact. That shouldn't have to be the case, and that's what we need to move forward to.
All right, and we're going to figure out how you're going to do that in a second, but first we're going to take a quick break. I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Jeff Schrammick, the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. Jeff, before break, we started to just get into the data conversation, so let's dive deep. Data is the new oil. It's the lifeblood. You fill in the blank, right? We talk about data all the time. You want to get to the point where you're providing better analytics, potentially analytics as a service. How do you get there? What are some of those steps you're taking? Maybe even go into that. You talked about the technology and data roadmap. You talked technology. Maybe talk about the data roadmap.
Yeah. So, the Bureau of Fiscal Service, because I mentioned before, we involved in both centralized services like our dispersing payment organizations and our collections and the like, and then our shared services. We support almost every federal agency out there, right? And so we have a lot of that data. So within the Bureau, we actually have a chief data officer who you've talked to many times, Justin Marsico. And so we are following his lead on how we in the Bureau should be looking at data. And so a lot of the strategies that he's putting in, we're following. Now, when you get specifically to ARC, we're looking, as I said before, within those systems. So I believe in our 4 business services, I'm trying to think through the tech and data roadmap right now. There's probably 8 to 10 systems that at the high level, and there's a bunch more. So we've got data in all those systems. So we've got to come up with a process, and we're doing that to be able to disseminate that information and get it to the agencies. And again, as I was saying in the beginning, we want to be able to do that in the way they want to consume it. Do they want us to segregate it, maybe do some analytics, or do they need to come in and be able to take care of it themselves? And so we've got to be able to set up the processes and the workflow to do that. So that is a key part of our data roadmap, part of the tech and data roadmap. I will also tell you that just from a transactional data processing place, we're continuing to use APIs and other tools from our software vendors, the robotic process automation bots I've mentioned to you, and our other government-wide or centralized services we have within the Bureau. So think about our e-invoicing tool, IPP, or our centralized receivable service, our dispersing services. we don't have to build everything over again. Let's take advantage of the Bureau's other systems and incorporate that into our offerings where appropriate. So then again, agencies that are coming to us and having to interface with us and get that data separately, now they could come to ARC and get all of that in one place.
I was just going to ask you about APIs. I was thinking about that as a way to kind of create that interoperability, connections between data. So it sounds like you're already well down that path.
Yeah, I think now I moved to our CIO, Joe, and he's really developed a IT strategic plan that includes the APIs in there. And so what I like about that process is, a lot of different systems or programs use different APIs. Well, let's get them into a place within the Bureau where, hey, could I use that API? So as there's data APIs developed that Justin and others are using, let's make sure we're able to get to them on the ARC side and vice versa. And so, yeah, we got a lot more work to do on that, but that's going to be some game changer, I think.
It's going to create the data and analytics that you're talking about. It's going to create the possibility of, okay, we have data in this system, data in that system, data in another system. Okay, how do we bring it all together into a business intelligence tool or some sort of dashboard, as you mentioned? So it's obviously a needed challenge, a needed tool that you guys are using. So I guess more to come on that in the coming months and years. The other piece of this that you talked about is understanding the customer needs, and we've gone back to that several times. And I think it's important to maybe take a half a step back and ask you how you measure your success or how you measure customer, the services you're providing beyond, we're going to focus on customer experience. What are some of your metrics?
Yeah, so I like to think that we do that in a couple ways. But what's been very impressive to me as being part of the ARC organization is the pride our staff takes in services we deliver and the positive impacts it has on the agency we serve. I mean, sometimes you'd wonder if somebody who works for Jeff actually works for the agency who's our customer, because they're so much supporting them on that side. So we have metrics at the micro level of those. We've talked about those, where it's the Baker dozen, the 13 services. Again, agencies who work with us know what our metrics are in each one of those, so they can see how well we're doing against those, and we track those. And do we need to make changes based on what we're improving on? Those are the things we continue to do from a micro level. From a macro level, I think there's three areas that I think we provide some real benefit. One is cost sharing, another is our audit support and status, and then the overall customer satisfaction. So in the cost sharing, in 2018, Fiscal Service set a goal for ARC in the 10-year vision to deliver $600 million in cost avoidance by 2023 for customer agencies through shared financial management systems. This includes the cost of maintaining these systems, the upgrade cost, the enhancement cost to meet regulatory changes, etc. Things like new mandates come out, the Data Act, for example. Those are things that we can help by coming to us as opposed to having to do that yourself. By first quarter of fiscal year 2022, ARC's customer agencies since 2018 have avoided over $500 million in these costs through ARC's Build Once, Use Many model. And so it's going to be through this mission support cost that we'll continue to provide that to the agencies. That's the cost side of it. There's the audit and control side of it, and I don't want to understate this as well, because I think in this environment we all think about the cost aspect of things, but many times agencies transition to ARC because they've had challenges in obtaining a positive audit result, or they have antiquated systems and processes that have led to internal control deficiencies and audit findings. So ARC, you get good audits response and you get good audit findings, come help us. And so in fiscal year 22, 30 of our ARC customers received positive audit results. And for one of our customers, 2 years in a row, they've gotten a positive audit result, where before it had been 10 years since they had gotten a positive audit result. So I want to say that's the control aspect of things that really benefit those agents. Again, if they don't have to spend time doing all of the fixes on their controls, or, hey, an audit says, hey, you got to make these changes, that's taking them away from their mission support services. So again, that's what a benefit you get. And then I think the customer satisfaction is a way to guide. I think we talked in the beginning that that's one thing. That really doesn't get you to customer experience, but it does tell you if it's low that you've got some work to do. You're not answering the phone or anything like that. Generally, throughout the years, our customer satisfaction has been around 90%. But that's because of all of the services we're providing. And so that doesn't mean we don't have a lot to do, but it does help us indicate that the agencies we are servicing really see the benefit of what we provide to them. And so I think that's a lot of how we measure. The last thing I will say on this is the mission focus of this. As I've said, we provide the mission support activities. So we're trying to figure out how ways to say how coming to ARC as a shared service provider really does save you that on the mission support side versus on the mission critical side that you have. So at a high level, that's kind of how we look at ourselves and provide some metrics.
First of all, I think on the customer, on the cost avoidance side, I think that's a key term there, because a lot of people want to focus on savings, and savings aren't always real, and it's not like, okay, well, you didn't spend that dollar, now you have it in the bank, but you did understand that if you would have supported this yourself, like your Oracle example earlier, it would have cost you $12 million potentially to move. Hey, you're doing it now for $200,000 to $300,000, and that delta is huge, and good luck getting that $12 million in as well. So I think that's a hugely important metric that sometimes people overlook.
Yeah, and I think there's that monetary aspect, but I think it's the human resources aspect of it too. Not having to have your staff work on those, it's not an easy thing to, even if you have the ability to hire in this environment, the skills that are needed for some of these things, you may not be able to get them. So if we're able to take that aspect for you and not have to have you spend time working on it, now they're on the mission program side again. I know I've said that a few times, but I think that's really key, that we want agencies to focus on the mission and let ARC, whose mission is to do back-end system support processes and other shared services, that's where our bread and butter is.
And that's how you have to drive value of shared services. Okay, I no longer have to do this. Okay, that's value to me. Oh, I'm going to save hours. That's value. And the other piece you didn't mention is you have to go through the contracting challenges of awarding a contract to upgrade your financial management systems. No matter what you say, that there's a time, there's a cost, and there's a protest. To be fair enough. The other piece that I just want to touch upon briefly is the audit side. And again, I think you're right. People underestimate. The CFO community has been on this path for 30 plus years, since the CFO Act of 1990, to get clean audits. And I think I remember like 23 of 24 agencies in the CFO Act agencies have clean audits now. I think DoD is the outlier. But not having to go through this long, arduous process to figure out if you have a clean audit or not is a huge, again, cost and time saver. Do folks seem to understand that, or are they coming around to, hey, wait a minute, I don't need to do 80%, I only have to do the 20% or whatever the percentages are?
Yeah, I believe the agencies who are on board with us are definitely seeing that, right, and are really appreciative of that. I can tell you, as the results of the audits were happening last year at the end of the calendar year there for FY 2021, positive emails coming to our staff to say, this is because of a lot of the work that you all did to be able to get us to that point. What's impressive to me when I talk to our staff is, again, we have the skilled resources who understand, they're accountants. They understand the controls and where we need to do. We're not always perfect, but it is a key thing that we do is being prepared and understanding the audit. So I was in a meeting this week, getting prepared for the audits that are going to happen this year. So we don't wait for them to show up. We're preparing and getting ready and making sure we're following through on the things we said we were going to do.
So it's fun when the auditors show up and, oh, you're coming today?
Yeah.
We just about a minute left. We're almost out of time. Before I let you go, we've had a tremendous conversation. We've covered a lot of different topics. Quickly, what's the message you want to make sure agencies and agency customers know? And then same thing for industry partners. What's the couple messages you want to leave them with?
I would say, as a shared service provider, ARC plays a critical part of achieving the Treasury financial management vision. And we are committed to innovation and delivering trusted shared services to federal agencies to perform those mission critical service. Again, it is our mission to get these back-end support processes there. So we're going to continue to strive to maximize value through increasing the adoption of shared services and providing timely data to agency CFOs and their staff to make timely decisions.
All right. A lot of pressure on you all, so I'm glad it's you and not me, but I've learned a lot. You guys seem to be on a really good path, so more to come, I'm sure, and we'll talk again soon. So let me thank my guest. Jeff Schrammick is the Deputy Commissioner for Fiscal Accounting and Shared Services at the Bureau of Fiscal Service in the Treasury Department. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time.
Jason, thank you for having me.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Ask the CIO, sponsored by Workday on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Ask the CIO. My guest today is Wayne Bobby, the Vice President for U.S. Federal Government at Workday. Wayne, great to catch up with you again.
Thank you, Jason.
Now, we just heard from the Bureau of Fiscal Service, Jeff Schrammick, about their move into shared services and how they've been supporting, I think, something like over 50 different agencies. They offer everything from HR to finance to travel to acquisition, a whole host of shared services. And then on top of that, Wayne, we know shared services is getting kind of a little reinvigoration in government. I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about how both the financial management and HR are really starting to get some momentum behind it. Once again, I should say, you and I have been probably talking about this now for 20, 25 years. So let's start right there. What stood out to you from my conversation with Jeff? What were some of the things that he said about shared services that you kind of are also seeing in the federal market?
Sure. So first, what we've seen around shared services is that the model works, right? So one thing you watch from one administration to the other, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, in office, that both sides believe in the idea of shared services and the model works. And listen to Jeff's comments, what they've been able to accomplish, at the Department of Treasury, both with the Bureau of Fiscal Service and HR Connect. They've been very, very successful at this. So when you look back at history, what started out as organizations providing services to kind of their own, immediate clientele and doing that well because it didn't make sense for a smaller organization to stand up a system all on their own, has taken on, larger, in many respects, other cabinet level agencies, on that same environment. And I think the model is just going to continue. I think what's going to be interesting now going forward is many of these shared services that we see today really kind of got established right around Y2K, maybe some, shortly thereafter in terms of how that model took off. I think we're going to see kind of some more growth spurts now in the next 10 years as you see the proliferation of cloud solutions and what that may bring inside of these offerings and how they can expand and include other capabilities that maybe they haven't thought of in the past.
I think your point is really important here about that. This is not something new. We've been seeing this now for 20 plus years. But the difference is, I think, and I think you're right in this, is the cloud and what those services are letting these providers do. When you talk about that, when you talk about the cloud services and why is the cloud such a game changer? We know in many ways that it is. We've been talking about it now for a decade, but why around shared services is such an important piece?
So I think the cloud is going to enable a number of things. One is many of these shared service centers enter into service level agreements with the software providers, right? So and those service level agreements can be negotiated for several years out with anticipation of how you're going to attract and retain customers. Now, the one thing we want to see accomplished here is both benefit for the government as well as in our case Workday as a software provider, is the more you can standardize in these offerings, the more the software provider can make those capabilities well known and accessible inside the software. So it's much more difficult if everybody wants to do it different, but if people standardize, then software providers like Workday are more than happy to say, we'll build out that functionality in our software, knowing that is back against a federal mandated requirement, and everybody's going to use that. So we don't need to build it multiple times for everybody to do something different, right? So I think you're moving to more standards-based capability, and that's matured. Service level agreements where you can look at several years, so both the federal government can look at their business model and what makes sense in terms of how they provide solutions, and how, and then like in the case of Jeff's organization, they're charging back to these agencies and they're trying to cover their costs, right? And then of course, for those agencies being serviced, they want to enter into an agreement where they're getting good service for the cost of what they're doing. And then finally, for the software provider, making sure we can do this at a reasonable cost so we can be successful, create those referenceable customers as a part of this. I think, in that model, everybody can gain.
Interesting you bring up the standardization piece. I know, talking with Office of Personnel Management, who's taken over the HR line of business just recently, talking with Bureau of Fiscal Service, both of them have really been pushing toward that standardization. What do we all do that's maybe 80% the same across government? That's really the key, is we've been there several times, but it seems like getting everyone to agree to that 80% or 90%, or whatever that percentage is, to really limit that customization. And then that's where the cloud can come in as well, is okay, if you only customize a short amount, that's, I should say, easier to do, or less complex to do, I should say.
Right.
What are you hearing from customers about that?
Well, I think the customers have come around to the idea of standardization. I think that for many years, there were some practices in place that they said, well, let me look at how I would do this. And really, you got in this debate between kind of customers and the software community in terms of what is a configuration, what is an extension inside the product that can accommodate some uniquenesses about what they do, but still fall within, what we would see as is still somewhat a standard way of conducting business. Maybe one has a little longer chart of account structure than another agency. That can make sense. Some agencies are well into grants management, some don't do as much grants management. So you do have some uniquenesses across a certain level. And I think that the goal you want to accomplish is get to that 80%, that people do. And then in that last mile of functionality, if you will, make that about configuration, extending that product, and not about customization, where that's where the agencies get into these costs. Both, I think the user community and the software community have learned if we can both kind of solve that last mile of functionality together, and I think we're quite close there now. I think that both sides really benefit.
The other side of this, and you talked about cost a couple of times, but I know Workday talked about a report from PwC, and when they asked about folks why they're moving to shared services, you all brought up this idea that 78% of all organizations reported cost reduction as a reason for pursuing, for instance, HR shared services. But 87% listed service improvements and 91% listed standardization as the reasons why. Cost is important, or cost reduction is important, but there's so many other benefits that come from taking on shared services. Let's talk about that for a little bit. When you talk to federal customers, how do you explain to them what other benefits are within reach?
I think, and I'm going to go back to some key points that Jeff made throughout, his talk, is it goes back to the mission of that agency, right? So every one of these agencies want to find a way to better enable the mission of that agency. And these finance, HR, accounting functions, payroll, procurement, travel, all these are back office functions. They're very important to helping that agency, run and mature, but also they're functions that you don't want those costs to run amok. I mean, you want to be able to say, how can I do these more cost effectively? And they're kind of the bass drum in the back of the marching band, right? That kind of help everybody kind of keep pace, but doesn't get too much out front in terms of, your cost, that is. So I think that, what we're seeing now is a much stronger focus on that key mission, the business results are trying to accomplish in these agencies, and how these systems can be kind of harnessed to really enable that mission, as opposed to take over and really cause disruption to that mission.
One of the big pieces of this, and it goes back to the standardization piece that you talked about, is the complexity, how to get rid of the complexity out of your HR, your finance, and where shared services can really, use the term simplify, maybe not the best word, and when we talk about these back office systems, but at least come to a standardization, as you said. That the part of that also is business process reengineering, or just understanding your business processes better, and then again, as you said, I think not customizing, but configuring them in a way. Is that the other piece that a lot of agencies can really take advantage of, and that you're starting to, as you talk to your customers, that's what they're interested in? Okay, how can we make this business process better? And then this will lead us to the conversation about AI, ML, RPA, and some of the other technologies.
Sure. So let me explain in terms of how we're doing this at Workday and how Workday does it across all these other industries where we've been very successful. So, I mean, we're well down that path of building out these federal requirements, OPM defined requirements for human capital management, payroll, treasury requirements for accounting, finance, and the like. And in doing so we're building this functionality into the product, and simply for our federal customers, as they acquire a Workday subscription and plan to go live, they're going to certainly just select that they're a federal customer, and that will toggle on those functions that are useful to them, right? And then they will have a good deal of that configuration already established, as opposed to starting from scratch to identify all those requirements. We're going to kind of level set or provide that baseline foundational piece that they'll want to have. And so I see that is really taking some of the problems that we had in years past, where people started in many cases with a commercially driven product, right? And then try to kind of add all these functions on top of it. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to allow them to just simply toggle on those functions. I think that's where you want to get to, is out of the box, if you will. Those federal functions are already defined. And then probably more importantly to that, Jason, as these requirements change over time, Congress makes a change, it results in something at Treasury, at OPM, that those requirements, as they're defined by the executive branch, then Workday is going to make sure that we enable that into the product. So it becomes our responsibility to keep these things current over the course of time, and not a burden on the agencies to figure out how to keep them current.
And that's the key here. Shared services is all about reducing that burden. And a lot of these back end office systems, whether it's HR or finance or whatever, has a lot of manual processes too. And I think that's the other piece of this, to get rid of those manual processes, free up your workforce. That's the other benefit that I think a lot of the agencies, especially in the finance world, are starting to realize. What are you seeing from your customers in that regard?
Well, we're certainly seeing a lot of benefits, and we bring, as a part of this, we bring what we call a value realization or value management team that kind of allows you to kind of draw that line in the sand when you start, right? In terms of what kind of achievements might we gain in terms of real hard numbers that can be achieved, and some soft numbers is a part of this too. But we're seeing some real gains that people can achieve that range from small percentages to large percentages, into 50, 60, 70% gains in terms of functional improvements, time improvements, capacity improvements, on the team itself. So we're seeing this that range, depending on how large a footprint you decide to go with Workday, and how many current systems you're able to turn off, and that's part of the goal here too, is how can I reduce the number of moving parts I have? And so those moving parts of those vast number of systems you have, the more of those you can turn off, the more gains, the higher achievement you can speak to. And I'm stopping short of giving you out, because we're seeing anything range from 20% to 80%. I don't want to just use like one hard number here, but it really does hit the full gamut of potential here in terms of what you can do when you really enable the software to kind of go to work for you.
When you talk about software going to work for you and really getting those gains, I mean, that can be paid off in so many different ways. We've talked a lot in the last 4 or 5 years about moving federal employees out of low skill or low value work to more high value work. That's the other benefit that maybe a lot of agencies aren't considering when it comes to shared services. Listen, hiring people is tough right now. It's tough for everyone. If you could take person X and put them onto a higher value work instead of the manual process, that's a huge gain for the agency. Are they starting to talk in that way when you talk to your federal customers? Are they understanding that's the opportunity that's in front of them?
So exactly, and I think we've kind of turned the corner on something recently that's kind of been out there for a long time, and that is moving from data to information, right? There's this whole idea of we have a ton of data in the system because we've had to enter all these transactions. So we know, we know everything about the employee and their benefits and where they're assigned and so forth. We know everything about the procurement transaction that we're processing in terms of what we're trying to acquire and who's the office that's buying that item. But how do we turn that into real information about our employees and their are we optimizing talent around that employee? Do we know potential opportunities that employee may move into as over the course of their career? Are we looking at those transactions on the procurement finance side in terms of if we're buying that particular item from one vendor, but we're getting a great price going in, but if all those items break down 6 months later, we really should know that and say, we really didn't get a good price after all because we got an inferior product, right? So these are kind of the informational things. And I think that we've really turned the corner on this in these software products, that as you process your daily transactions, everything about what you're doing is right on your screen, much more informational, much more analytical about who we're doing these transactions on behalf of, and what's that information we need to know to kind of make these daily decisions. And I think that's the real gain that we've sought to achieve for a number of years. I think we're getting there now.
So much of the conversations we have with federal executives is about driving, data to drive decisions. And so much of the conversations we have with them is how do you get the right data at the right time to the right person and make sure it's secure. So all those pieces that you're talking about, getting that to the information side is so important. And I think that's a good segue to talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and some other similar, if you will, I don't know if we call them emerging technologies anymore, Wayne, but some of those technologies that can really help push agencies toward that information side. Are you, again, shared service is a perfect opportunity, greenfield, if you will, for a lot of these technologies?
They really are. And these technologies really kind of picking up on that whole idea of analytics, that the technologies really allow you to. So if you're doing, in the case of machine learning, if you're doing your daily tasks and going through, then the machine, these computers are able to kind of recognize what you're doing, define kind of what are those habits that the computer sees in terms of what you're doing, and then how do we turn that into kind of a better understanding of who you are and what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and what do we learn from that? So I think that we're seeing that in all sorts of areas. And there's some clear examples of that at Workday that we're applying to customers today.
Do you get the sense that that's the one area where agencies maybe don't quite understand the value of applying AI and ML, meaning you have to see it to believe it, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a couple things happen here. So for the most part, a lot of agencies moved out with legacy software solutions and sort of put some artificial intelligence or machine learning on top of those. Now, the vendors that are out there today, software providers like Workday, now have these machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities built into their offering, right? So you can do this in a number of ways. You can acquire a solution like you had in the past, and you can add machine learning and artificial intelligence to that, or you can kind of move forward with a more emerging capability like what Workday provides, and all that functionality is kind of built in to what you already have. And so that can provide you some additional gains too, because we've already sort of figured that out with other customers before we got to you, right? In terms of what are some of those standard things that people want to learn or want to achieve. One of those things we've seen at Workday just in the last few years is this whole idea around inclusion, belonging, and equity. So, and we have that at Workday called VIBE, that we want to value inclusion, belonging, and equity. But we've seen this across, millions of customers or users we have today. We have a lot of statistics about organizations and some of those metrics that they seek to achieve as they want to improve these metrics across diversity and so forth. And we're able to share that with customers today so they can see, how do I compare with other customers like myself, similar size and complexity as I have, how do I compare with others like me, right? And you see all that in the federal government, because the federal government really is a melting pot of all these things, whether the federal government's doing healthcare at the VA or retail at commissaries or financial services at Social Security or other parts of Treasury. All these are functions that exist in other industries that we can certainly share what those metrics and what some of those gains may be.
Wayne, I've enjoyed our conversation a lot. We're just about out of time. Before I let you go, what's your advice to agencies who are still on the fence or say, well, I don't really understand the value. Why should I move to shared services? I'm already doing it in-house and it works fine. I got a clean audit. I hire people in, maybe it's not the fastest time, but at least they get hired. I get them in their seats. What's your advice to them about why shared services and what can they do to really jump into the fray, even, dip that toe in to get started?
I think that they find that once they dip their toe and look into this further, they find that, wow, there are significant gains that I can achieve. They tend to see that we are comfortable where we are now, but they really don't know what the potential is. And I think that what they should do is go in and do the analysis. The analysis, like I mentioned earlier, is that Workday will do this. We'll quantify this on behalf of that prospect or customer and do a value realization exercise. That's a billable function that we perform, just kind of help people understand, what is possible for me going forward. What we see, Jason, is so many of these federal customers, they kind of know what they do. They've been doing it for many years. And what they see, what they know is kind of what's in front of them in terms of supporting their interests at their agencies. And I think that it's good from time to time to take a look back, step away from how you're doing things today, look at what's going on in other industries, look at what's going on in other agencies around, Washington, D.C. in terms of, what may be possible for you. But do that in a way with software providers like Workday that you're not doing it. You're not getting what I would describe as a sales presentation. You're kind of getting an education, if you will. So do it in more of an educational way to kind of gather and keep yourself current with what's available to me. And then when it's the right time for your agency, you're going to know that. And then that's when you'll want to decide to move forward. But again, you do all that with the key mission of the agency in mind. I think that's keep that, as Jeff pointed out, always keep the agency's mission, out in front of you and keep that in mind as you pursue these gains and these goals.
I think the fact you all are offering this analysis free of charge, no commitment necessary. And if the agency comes back to you and says, Wayne, hey, appreciate it, but it's not the right time. You understand that. You all understand how this process works. At the right time, maybe 6 months from now or 6 years from now, but eventually there will be a right time. And just having that analysis in place to understand what the value is, that's a really awesome first step. Wayne, I think we're out of time for today, but let me thank you for your time. This is a great conversation. My guest is Wayne Bobby, the Vice President of U.S. Federal Government at Workday. Wayne, always a pleasure to catch up.
Thank you, Jason.
I'm Jason Miller, and you're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Workday. On behalf of Federal News Network, thanks for joining us. A link to the archive session will be available shortly. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.